Whenever there's an invitation to do something new, usually there'll be some excitement about it. But I think if it's immediately followed by resistance or fear, particularly self-doubt or thinking you're unqualified, I think that self-doubt and resistance is confirmation that you're on the right path.
Welcome to the Friends with Benefits podcast, an Arcadia production. This is the show all about how to grow in business, lead with purpose, and live with intention. We're your co-hosting couple. I'm Jason.
And I'm Sam. Welcome to the show, friends.
Hey, friends. Welcome back to the show. So glad you decided to spend some time with us this week. And we've got a banger of a show for you today. We've invited a friend of ours we've known for quite a while, Tim Washer, to join us. Some of you may be familiar with Tim, some of his work. He does a lot of corporate type style events, but his events are a little bit different than ours or any others that I've actually been a part of. And Tim's story is wild. He's 20 years working with IBM, Cisco, and some other mega corporations who turned to comedy and acting later in his career. Now he spends his time training teams, executives, and beyond how to incorporate humor into the work they do. He's an improv expert, trained by Amy Poehler. Yeah, the Amy Poehler. Spent some time on the Conan O'Brien show, appearances on the show, the John Oliver show, and a few other shows that we talk about. Wild experience. But we talk a lot about incorporating humor into the work you do, into sales, into marketing, and how humor helps you build trust, build that trust faster, accelerates it, how vulnerability opens new doors and trust, and how humor is expressed through that. It's a fascinating show. If anyone's ever thought about how you can, maybe be more funny, or how to build trust faster, or even if you thought about what vulnerability looks like in the work that you do, highly encourage this episode and getting to know Tim. He's a great follow over on LinkedIn and Instagram as well. Hope you get as much out of this as we did. And we hope also that we see you at Arcadia Leadership Experience this summer. We're bringing together 65 go-to-market leaders right here in Bozeman, Montana for a 3-day, what I like to call immersive experience. We've got your sessions with some thought leaders like Lindsay DeChimka, Adam J., and a few others that you may know. But more importantly, we spend time out in nature here in Montana. We believe that 3 days in nature completely rewire your nervous system, reduce those stress levels, give you whole new ideas for creativity and business and life. And then you teach you how to fly fish, hike, yoga, all sorts of really great, fun stuff happening in Arcadia this summer. Going to have a lot of your friends, our friends here. It's just going to be a great time all around. Reach out to us if you have any questions, or check us out at arcadialeadershipexperience.com. We'll catch y'all later. Tim Washer, my man, my friend, my former visitor to Bozeman a few times. Welcome to the podcast. Sam, hello. You look beautiful with your new haircut.
Thank you, thank you.
Tim, how are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me. I think my publicist has been hounding you guys for like 2 years.
I mean, the list is long of people to get on the podcast, so you should feel
the bribe was definitely helpful. I will say that. Like, that was the first, and that definitely wasn't necessary, but we'll take it. Well, anyway, Tim, we've known each other for quite a while. We've done some fun conferences together, a couple of videos together, I do believe. So it's really fun to have you on this podcast and talk a little bit about the work you've been doing and the life that you've been living. I will say I'm quite fascinated with your journey. Right, you've spent about 20 years inside the behemoths, right? IBM, I think you were at Cisco for a while, and you were moonlighting, doing some work for Conan O'Brien and SNL.
Yes.
I mean, that's a universe of juxtaposition.
That's a career.
I've never seen one, right? that's a chasm no one has quite, I don't think, successfully crossed. And I think most.
Nor
people
have
kind of like, I mean, I don't know. I think seen you do your thing. You weren't on Conan. Were you on the Colbert Show? Like, you actually had an appearance?
No, I was on Conan. Quite a bit. And it was John Oliver. I did some acting on John Oliver.
Okay. Obviously, that's like one. Some people pick tech, or they'll kind of pick comedy, acting, writing, whatever. You kind of pick both, right? So, A, I want to know how that happened. And B, like, was there ever, like, tension between those two worlds, or did they actually feed each other?
No one's asked me that question before, but there was tension. It didn't come from the tech world so much. It came from my ex-wife. Brought a lot of attention to that. Man, I think it was about 30 years ago. I was moved up to New York from Texas. I was working as an analyst, and then there was this moment where I realized my calling in life was comedy. And I very reluctantly moved forward in that, just out of fear. I realized it was an obligation on what I was supposed to do in my life.
Okay, so, wait, we got to pause there. The moment you realized it was a calling, what is this moment?
Okay, so I was at a church in Manhattan, and we had this wonderful, it was during the season of Lent, this Lenten devotional guide, where you just read a devotion all 40 days through Lent. And one day it talked about, there was a quote from a guy named Frederick Buechner, a German Presbyterian pastor. And he says, the place God calls you to is a place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. And that was like, okay, let me listen to that for a little bit. I forget where I was at the time. I think I was still working as an analyst, and I enjoyed the job, but I definitely felt unfulfilled. I think I was maybe 29, but I thought, man, this is fun. I think I can do it okay. But something was missing. I'd been praying about this for a while. In the daily devotion, it has like these 3 questions. And the first question is, what is your spiritual gift? What if this belief that everybody on the planet has been given a gift? What is yours? And I thought comedy. And then the second question was, what have other people confirmed this gift with you? And I thought, yeah, that's been the case. And the third question was, on a spirit of 1 to 10, how well have you been a steward of this gift that God's given you? And I thought 0, not even on the scale. And as soon as I thought 0, I felt this word pop into my head, and it was obligation. I thought that was God's voice. My interpretation, what this means is I have an obligation to pursue comedy. And so I didn't want to do it. So I just started talking to my friends and saying, hey, I'm going to try out comedy. And one of my buddies from college who was working in the Northeast, she told me about this theater called Upright Citizens Brigade. And so I went there and took an improv class, and Amy Poehler was my instructor.
Oh.
Wow.
Okay.
This is a few years before she was Amy Poehler. She was just working in a little dingy. It was dingy. It was a dingy improv theater, maybe 50 seats. And it was called Solo Arts.
So I hadn't quite made it to SNL yet, had she?
Probably 3 or 4 years after that, Jason, she got on SNL. I got invited to go to help out on some sketches, just like a background actor, and then started writing for her on Weekend Update, freelance. The doors just started opening. You know, Conan came on after that. I met the casting director from Conan, and after doing a commercial, and started doing Conan pretty regularly. And then, did some other stuff. Just doors kind of kept opening. You know, later it was James Corden writing, and then John Oliver acting on his show when he first got his show on HBO.
It's incredible.
Okay, wait. I have one more question from that story. Jay, I'm sorry to keep cutting you off. When you were going through those 3 questions, and comedy was your spiritual gift, and that was like an obvious answer to you, like, was this a part of your life as a kid? How was that such an obvious answer to you?
It wasn't part of my life other than I knew I could make people laugh. Sam, the struggle for me, getting back to Jason's question about tension, like my mom did not like that. Like I remember she didn't like me laughing. She didn't like me making other people laugh. She kind of tried to squash that.
Didn't want you to be the funny guy, huh?
I guess that was it.
Was she a serious person?
No, she wasn't serious. You know what? She was hurt. She was, I didn't find out till just a few years later. I did a TEDx talk about this one time and posted it. And my cousin, who I hadn't talked to in 30 years, reaches out to me and tells me that, hey, both of our parents, they went through some pretty serious abuse as kids. She asked me, she said, let me know if you ever want to talk about it. And I didn't. I said, maybe someday, but I'm still my mom passed away about 4 years ago. I still need to forgive her. We all have wounds from our parents.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Even if they're the perfect parents. Yes.
Yes. And maybe some of it's unintentional, something our parents say or do, but it's the way we interpret it.
And the way we embody it.
That's even more important. Actually, just this week, I've had a few meetings where I kind of started feeling like getting my confidence back. Just this week. It's just crazy. I got a call from my former boss at IBM. And I mean, this guy, he ran global communications, global PR for IBM. He was a tough guy. He used to be head of comms for the New York City mayor, Ed Koch, back in the day. And he says, hey, let's go to lunch. We had lunch this Tuesday. It was just somebody encouraging me. I had told him, I haven't announced this yet, but my next calling is maybe 2 months ago. I just felt like, okay, I need to move to Texas. Matthew, my son, he's going to Texas A&M. So he's leaving in August. Man, he's had some health challenges and stuff. And I just thought, you know what? I didn't think. I just got this, just like the calling before of that, hearing that word obligation. I just kind of felt like I heard, move down there with him. Sam, we were in the middle of a hike at this beautiful waterfall. And we were just hiking, talking about him getting admitted to Texas A&M. And it just hit me on the trail. And I think that's I know you guys are big into wilderness and getting outdoors. And I think that's one of the best places to get connected to, whether you call it the universe or the source or God. I think being out there in the wilderness and really focusing on nature and the majesty of nature is where a lot of times I'll hear, a calling on what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Love that. Absolutely.
So that's the next thing. It's like, okay, move to Texas. And I don't know where I'm going yet. Then about 2 weeks later, I felt called to be a professor, apply for jobs at college, for, teaching communications. So I'm just going to see where that leads, but I'm going to move at the end of July.
What I love about this is that, like, you feel the urge or the calling, whatever you want to call it, and you follow it. Like, I think there's something special there. Like, most people will feel like this urging, this calling, this time to make change, and they don't follow. Is it scary for you to kind of like, this is a risk, like comedy? Yep, I think I'm funny, but like being the funny guy doesn't always lead to like being a professional, comedian, writer, actor, or whatever. But you decide to choose it. They think I'll be a professor. I can do this. Like, you've apparently got some confidence in making the changes. Like, what's that look like for you to make that step and that leap?
There's two things. One, I think whenever we have a calling placed on our life, or whenever there's an invitation to do something new, usually there'll be some excitement about it. But I think if it's immediately followed by resistance or fear, particularly self-doubt, or thinking you're unqualified, I think that self-doubt and resistance is confirmation that you're on the right path of how you should be spending your life. And Jason, we were talking earlier, about improv principles, and one is follow the fear. And this idea of in improv, when you're up on stage with your partner and an idea pops in your head, you'll get like 4 or 5 ideas at the same time. That happens for everybody. Their ideas are always popping up. There's another improv principle called silence your inner critic, because we all carry around so much self-doubt.
100%.
When you're in improv, you understand, look, it's not about coming up with something smart on the fly or about being witty. It's about being willing to silence your inner critic. And if, the scariest idea that comes to mind that you think has the most risk for you as a performer, that's the one you have an obligation to pursue.
That's a great principle just for life, obviously, which is I know what we're talking about here. But
it's changed my life. I started off at comedy, doing stand-up and doing improv and all these things, and I wasn't able to make a living at it. And I also knew the person I was married to at the time did not like that. She wanted me to go work for a corporate job. So I had internal resistance and a lot of good external resistance too. I did it for 2 years, comedy, and I was just starting to make some good money at it after 16 months in. But we were relying on her paycheck. I know she wanted me to go work for a big company. This door opened to work at IBM as a speechwriter. I was trying to get into corporate events. I thought, well, if I could work at corporate events, I could write funny jokes for speeches, and I could also maybe, MC some events, bring humor in that way. And my wife at the time would have been happy because I'd have a steady paycheck. And then this speechwriter job comes open, and I definitely thought I was not qualified for it. And I wasn't. I didn't have this list of speeches that I've written or anything like that. After doing stand-up for years, I knew how to write. Nothing teaches you how to communicate like stand-up comedy, because you get brutal, honest truth from an audience that does not know you. I mean,
and it's pretty immediate.
It is immediate. That's right.
Your stage time relies on reaction.
Yes. You learn those lessons. Those lessons hurt. It's definitely hard at first. Feeling confident you have something funny and then the joke just bombing for some reason or another. Anyway, I got this interview at IBM, and they ended up giving me the job because I had done a comedy commercial. It was a really funny commercial. And I didn't find that out till later. This is a great follow the fear story. I went to meet with his general manager of the mainframe business. This business generates about a third of IBM's profit at the time.
So some chunk change.
Significant.
From a revenue standpoint, it's like a $10 billion business at that time. And so I'm meeting with the guy who runs that. This guy speaks like 5 different languages. I mean, he's a rocket scientist. And I'm going in there to meet with him, and I'm thinking, what in the world am I going to say to this guy? Their marketing team had put together this new buzzword called infrastructure simplification. And I did a comedy bit on that. I said, listen, anytime you take the word simple and more than double the numbers of syllables, you're heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Yarby, I tried to let that roll off my tongue and just toss it out like I knew what I was talking about in infrastructure simplification. And I couldn't even get it. I stumbled all over the place. The general manager says, stop. He said, listen, let me tell you. And he talked for 40 minutes straight. And I just sat there. And then at the end of it, he says, I like you. I'm like, I didn't say anything.
You're like, there could have been a blank wall in front of you, but
That's right.
Learned a great rule about listening that day.
I guess so. I felt like such an idiot for mispronouncing their big fancy terminology, but I got the job. And then I just thought comedy was over then. I figured, well, that's the death of the comedy career because I'm at IBM. And I remember like a couple of months later, on day 2, actually, the guy who ran global sales reaches out to me, my second day at work. He says, hey, I hear you're funny. I got a speech in Japan. Can you write a joke for me? And I was just
oh
like,
boy.
okay.
In Japan.
Yeah, I feel like
Okay.
the Japanese culture.
Japanese aren't typically, not typically jokesters.
Yeah.
That is, I used the image for a payoff. You know what I mean? It was a PowerPoint. I wrote a setup joke and then I put an image up for the payoff. So to minimize being lost in translation.
That's a good solution there.
Yes, it worked. And then a few months later, I sat down with the head of sales and said, okay, what are your priorities? You know, what are the things we need to work on this coming calendar year? And he talks about the sales force. He says, well, listen, so our sales force needs to change. They go in there with like 13 people on a sales call. The client doesn't want that. So they go in there with too many people. He said they don't take time to understand the customer's business. And then there was one other thing that he told me. I'm sitting there thinking to what he's saying. And I'm like, dude, that's a comedy video. We should just take those behaviors and heighten them and make a comedy video about it. And it worked.
Also, you just described like every sales VP in SaaS.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's been going on for years, and it is every B2B SaaS problem.
Yeah.
The same thing.
Absolutely.
And I created a comedy video, and it just blew up. And they were like,
Was it a comedy video used internally at IBM, or is it something you just made on your own outside of IBM?
It's funny you asked that question. So I told my boss at the time, I told him about what happened, and this guy asked me to make a video, and so I'm done, and I'm shooting it next week. And he's like, well, what? He said, how are you going to shoot this? And I said, I got a friend who's going to shoot it for me. And he said, where are you getting the money? I said, well, I'm paying him myself. I told him I'd give him $400 if he'd come and do this for me. He said, well, you can't do that. He's an unapproved vendor. That's a fireable offense.
What?
That's when I knew I knew that it's like, I'm not going to last too long here. I was there like 5 years, and that became my job. They ended up paying for the video. IBM did. And then they said, all right, why don't you keep going? Before almost every video I did, I was certain I was going to get fired.
Get pushing the envelope a little bit more every time?
Yes. I was just like, man, I'm going to get fired for this. You know, that was a lesson to me about like, okay, I need to be a little more optimistic about life. Some organizations, there's a lot of fear, particularly when you're trying to do anything different. It was a good lesson for me. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Sometimes you get a little dark, and you shouldn't. It's going to all work out.
Okay, but I think there's something interesting to that too. Like, I started my career as a creative director, and there's some similarities here. And like, sometimes in order to make a point, you really do have to push those boundaries. And like, if you just keep saying things the same way, of course it's going to get lost, which is why every VP of sales is like, there's too many of you on a call. You don't do enough discovery. Yeah. And then it turns into the teacher from Charlie Brown, and nobody makes any changes.
Right.
And that is a scary thing to get used to, because it is out of the like quote unquote boundaries of what's acceptable. Yet what's acceptable isn't working in the first place.
We keep trying the same things over and over again.
Yeah, and then everybody gets frustrated because there's no change. So IBM, that's one of the biggest companies in the world. You know, you've just shared some stories about this, but you've seen what communication can do to a culture or to a specific relationship or deal cycle or whatever. Clearly, you've brought humor into all of that. So I'd be curious for you, make that case for us. Like, why should a VP of sales or a CRO actually care about being funnier? And what are they leaving on the table if they don't?
Okay. So that's, man, I don't know if I'm prepared for this call. This is tough, you guys. Look, that's
Just improv your way through it.
no, I can do that. I'm just telling you, it's a tough case to make. It's funny. I used to present this. I get some market research that shows the percent of companies that intend to use humor in their messaging next year. And I showed that to people, and I thought I built a pretty good case about it. And I'd even talk about some of the benefits of it releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. If you talk about the neuroscience, it's a solid case. I didn't know how to do this back then. But talking about just how, laughter will reduce your critical thinking and it'll make you open to more new ideas. If you laugh, if you open up a meeting where there's laughter, which is good, it allows you to consider different creative possibilities when your amygdala would have shut it down before you even heard the idea. So I think you could maybe make the case with neuroscience. When I was trying to make this case with pie charts and talk about percent planning on using it and that kind of thing, it didn't work. And what I found is you had to show somebody and let them feel the joy of watching well-written comedy and well-executed comedy, meaning that it's not done by an approved vendor. These approved vendors come in and they know all the rules that they don't want to break. Their goal is we want to get this project approved. Let's reduce anything that might bring up fear in the audience.
Reduce risk. Be as beige as possible.
That's exactly right. But that's what sells projects in the SaaS world. And this is why it sounds like the Charlie Brown teacher. The blah, 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 blah. You don't cut through the noise.
Womp, womp.
I did this video at Cisco. We were selling this as a $250,000 router, that you sell only to British Telecom and AT&T, Verizon, those folks. Cisco was selling to, this high-end enterprise stuff. And so it was a $250,000 router, and we were launching it on February 9th. And so we were thinking about, okay, how can we position this out there? And we thought, well, February 9th, let's sell this as a perfect gift for your Valentine. I almost got fired for this one, too. Actually,
The name of your memoir.
That's right. No, this was the video that led Cisco to creating a brand approval division. So
You gotta love that.
and I'm not kidding.
You're just making history.
Thank you very much. But it did well. We simply took all these bizarre technical advantages and benefits that we had on the brochure and pitched that as romance. What a romantic way to, whatever, 300 terabits of throughput. What a perfect way to say I love you kind of thing. And I found these awesome images, these kind of vintage images of romance. And then I worked with a buddy of mine who was my partner at doing the IBM work, this guy named Scott Teams. And this guy, now he's crushing it. He's out in Hollywood. Man, he's done some big movies. Like he wrote Narcos, Mexico. And he's done some big stuff. Anyway, this incredibly successful director, he's so talented. And
He comes on board to help you write the Cisco stuff?
Yes. He shot the videos and edited them for me. He's just so good at comic timing. He's wonderful. And it's so funny to hear Cisco, look, here are the brand guidelines talking about you need to see what kind of lights your vendor has in the studio. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And nowhere in here do we talk about whether or not we're going to produce anything that's meaningful. Does anybody care if we can create a good story? No, they just care about the size of the studio, and because you can't measure those things. And just like with video, with corporate video, here's the two things you can measure. Did we produce it on time for the launch, the product launch? And did we come in under budget? Those are the two metrics that matter. And people rarely will sit there and look and see how well the video did. But did it make somebody laugh? Did it move people emotionally? Did it actually change behavior? Or did it impact the culture? They're so difficult to measure, they get ignored. And you just get back to, okay, well, look, did we finish on time? And did we come in under budget? It just is such a disaster. Is
it out there? Perfect.
Yeah.
It really makes me think of something that you and I talked about last time we caught up, and kind of where I wanted to build this conversation around was that you said that the ability that humor has to truly build trust.
Yeah.
I feel like that video, as far as what you put out there, perhaps maybe let the customers, the ideal customer, build more trust with the brand of Cisco. Right. Also sounds more like what you're trying to work with companies to teach these execs, why humor is important. It allows you to build trust. What is it about humor or the ability to build that into your marketing strategy, your sales, pitches or whatever, that allows you to build trust when these other stodgy, stuffy things really don't?
There are two key points there. One is, Brene Brown got us all thinking about vulnerability and how important that is. But so few people understand the proper way to be vulnerable in a business context. And the thing about humor is it allows you to be vulnerable in a gentle way and be able to share something about yourself. So like when you're doing something self-deprecating, like going back to that IBM video, just that one point about sending 13 salespeople in. Well, that's what we did. We filmed that. There was no room for the CIO of the customer side. Somebody else took his chair from IBM. He had to get up and leave. It shows a couple things. One, we have empathy for our customers because we understand you guys hate this, and we're showing you that we're aware. So it establishes empathy there. It shows that, okay, we understand that you hate it when we just fill up the room with salespeople. We're spending our advertising budget creating something that, one, benefits you from an entertainment standpoint because it makes you laugh, but it also shows that we're aware of our knuckleheadness. You can take that as a commitment to we're going to change. Actually, I combine two things there. It's kind of being silly as a step forward to being vulnerable. And then the second thing is using in a very intelligent way, self-deprecating humor.
Yeah.
So you're not saying I'm stupid, but we make mistakes, meaning like we send too many people on a sales call, that kind of thing.
Both those things, like the silliness and the self-deprecation, they're both just you putting yourself out there and like being willing to put yourself out there, whether you're trying to be silly and it may not land or you're kind of self-deprecating in the right sense. But both of those things, like it's just you putting yourself out there and being willing to, risk that, which is hard for a lot of people.
And more the second point along those lines, Jason, is when I'm honest with you by saying, I realize we made a mistake here. We send too many salespeople on there. And I put that out there in a comedy video. You begin to see that not every communication that we're going to have, the two of us will have, is about me pitching you a product and telling you how awesome it is, about the throughput or 5 nines of reliability. Instead, I'm leading with something that, look, I realize this is a mistake we've made, and I also understand how it makes you feel, because just look how ludicrous this is on the screen.
Yeah.
And we missed it. You start to believe it's like he's willing to be honest with me, and he's not always telling me how awesome he is, how awesome the product is. That's what begins to thaw the ice and let people start to trust you.
Okay, I have a few tactical questions on this. Maybe that's not the right word, but you just said very few people understand how to be vulnerable in an appropriate manner in the workplace. I think that's probably also true for how to be funny in the workplace, because I think people can be funny at the expense of their coworkers or their employees, or it quickly can become inappropriate. So say somebody's listening to this and they're like, yeah, I should definitely bring more humor into the way I show up at work, but I don't know how. And that's scary to me, not from like the fear perspective that we've been chatting about, but from the like, I don't want to get fired by HR for making an inappropriate joke.
Yes. What I would do is sometimes being local and meeting somebody in person helps reduce the fear, because it can create this sense, and sometimes it's a facade, that you have more control in the process. And, if we're sitting down in person, face to face, it lets people feel like it's going to be easy to communicate. I'll have a little bit more control in the process. And the thing is, a client, you think you want control, but you really need to do your best to let go of control. So I would I'd find a local improv comedy club, but look at somebody where people, not like the Giggle Shack or something. You look and see if they do long form comedy. There's a long form format called the Herald. You're going to get a group of people who are really cerebral, who are clever about the comedy. And it's a whole different thing than doing like a Whose Line Is It Anyway? So I'd find a local theater or one close by that does long form improv and then has people there who've come from Upright Citizens Brigade or the Groundlings on the West Coast or Improv Olympic. Because then they have a good heritage of looking at a problem and kind of seeing the absurdity in that problem and then bringing that to life and like juxtaposition. You might take, some SaaS-related problem, like being slow on deliverables, supply chain, and then saying, okay, what if we take that same problem that supply chain deals with and then we put it into a marriage and talk about how delays in delivery cause problems in a marriage. You want somebody who thinks at that level, who thinks, abstractly and can think about things that get to like a metaphor. People who can think in metaphors. A lot of these places will have corporate comedy division where they come out and do some stuff at the, for meetings. The key is saying, look, let's start off and do something for an internal sales meeting and try it there. That's how I did it at IBM. I pitched this idea because salespeople love humor. They love to laugh, more so than like your group of accountants. Take it to a sales kickoff meeting, show it there. If it gets a good response, then it's like, okay, let's launch this more broadly, internally, online through Slack or whatever, and, a place that we know it can't get out of the company.
Even better, like if you can take your whole team, if you got to do it just as an individual, but if you can take the whole team, take the whole team.
Oh, yeah, heck yeah. That's a great idea.
Or hire Tim Washer to come in and do it.
Even better.
That's the best idea yet.
Can we start recording the whole show over and just focus on this one piece? I think you've got
Totally. Yeah.
the gold.
I just hit the record button, so thankfully you're good.
I'm glad you forgot.
I will say we did have somebody come to Arcadia Leadership Experience last year, Gabby McKellan, who's a friend, but she taught improv to everybody. First, everybody was kind of like, oh my God, what? What are we doing? Why? And by the end of it, that was our most highly rated session because it got people out of their comfort zone. It got them like being playful, which I feel like in adulthood, playfulness is not a given.
We don't get that all the time, right?
And then also just like the ability to your point, I think it broke down walls. It made people vulnerable much quicker than they would have gotten to in like a normal conversation setting.
Yeah.
And it just made conversation and communication so much more fluid, which was really cool to witness. But I think that like humor and business, they don't mesh well often because there's not like this is serious. We are growing, like there's no room for jokes.
We have numbers
So-
to
That's
hit.
right. People think that. And I think we have this feeling of like, okay, so comedy is the antithesis of being serious. And we do need to seriously, we got these revenue goals, we have these profit goals. We got to be serious about that. That's looking at the wrong relationship. I did an improv workshop for a big media company for their top 22 executives. Okay. And the CEO kind of pulls me aside at the beginning. He said, I didn't like this idea of doing improv. I mean, what are we going to learn how to sing songs and stuff? He said, they sold me on it, but I don't like this idea. I'm glad he told me. I said, look, what's the biggest challenge that you're having with this team right now? And he said, well, people won't raise their hand. They won't, if I mention a problem on a meeting, people won't jump into that and say, I'll take it on. They're kind of afraid to try. And I said, man, that's what improv's all about. That's all we're going to do here today. And so we had the executive, we played some improv games. It's probably what you guys did too, just to loosen people up, get them feeling comfortable. And again, laughing, because that frees your mind a lot. And then we just brought like two people up at a time, and we'd take one of the improv principles, and I'd give them a initiation, that's the word I'm looking for, from the audience. And then we'd work it out as a scene. And what people left with is like trust. It was like, okay, we played around, I kind of coached this thing along if it needed, and I really didn't have to do it that much. But people felt like they trusted each other.
Probably felt more closely connected as a result as well.
That's it. That's exactly it. So, that's what we were doing, is trying to get people to be comfortable with one another and to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So they would try new ideas afterwards. I think particularly since COVID, we're all so risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
I think
The world
we all,
is so serious.
That's exactly. And
I
we
listened to
take
a really
that
good
on.
podcast kind of about this the other day. Like you're talking about comfort and being so serious and avoiding risks. Is like, for whatever reason, like the gap that is actually between discomfort and danger is a very, very wide gap. But for whatever reason in today's time, like people feel like there is no gap. Like they associate discomfort with danger.
Yes.
Right, and they whether it's their job is at risk or something is at risk, so they associate like because it's uncomfortable, it's dangerous, or they shouldn't do it. When in actuality, I think you find your comfort in discomfort, like you find your confidence in the discomfort.
Totally.
I think if more people kind of follow that path, like they would widen that, they would see that gap is much further than what they actually think it is.
Right. Well said. Heck yeah.
I want to talk about Tim. We're coming up on time, and we want to be conscious of that. But let's talk about Tim for a second, right? So you've spent the latter part of your career, right, helping people, sales leaders, execs, whatever, be more human at work through comedy, right? So what about you? What does this work do for you, Tim Washer, and why does this matter to you personally?
It matters to me first and foremost is because I believe it's my calling. So I want to be obedient to that. That's the most important thing. You know, I feel this is God's plan on my life, for my life. And that's what I want to try to keep at the top of my life, you know, meaning a priority for my work life. The thing is, though, I mean, I still struggle with a lot of this, you know, with this self-doubt. You know, I was married for 20 years. It was not a good marriage. And then I spent the last 11 years post-divorce, still going back to court. My ex takes me back like almost every 3 months for 11 years. And I have allowed that to drag my perspective down, you know, and get to a point where I've lost hope and that kind of thing. And so coming back to some of these improv principles, once I was willing to kind of get up and dust myself off a few years ago, it's like I'm learning it all over again, you know, the follow the fear thing. I walked away from my faith during the divorce. You know, I quit going to church. I quit praying. Something happened in 2019. Again, I kind of felt another voice of like, okay, go to church today. And I did that. And that's helped bring faith back into my life. And so that combined with the improv and parenting, knowing that I don't want my kids to grow up the way I have been living after the divorce. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't want my kids to live that way. We don't celebrate good grades. We'd celebrate when they take a swing and there's a miss. Just to try to encourage them, not focus on the outcome, but reframe it so the outcome is, you know, I got up and took a swing.
Change the narrative.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So a lot of reframing.
I think we'll have to adopt that for sure. Because I think that's another question that I want to ask you. This has maybe been a through line throughout the conversation, but to the beginning of like that moment that you felt comedy was your calling to leaving a corporate job, then obviously you landed at IBM and there was but I feel like that people may or may not know that they get nudges from the universe, from whatever they want to call it, and they'll ignore it because it feels insane. It feels so far away. It feels completely illogical. And the reality is, most of the time, that's true.
Yes.
And the timing between like, I'm going to listen to this and take a swing, quote unquote, to this actually turning into something that has a positive outcome can be a minute.
Yes,
and
it can.
That's terrifying. Speaking for a
Yes.
friend.
Yes. Yes.
So, like, what advice do you have for people that are like in that moment of like, I can't do that because there's no way that this is going to work with my current lifestyle,
Yes.
or, you know, there's so many things that go into that.
Listen, what you just described, like the last 20 years of my life, or maybe 30 years, of I can't do this because, and I did. There were times where I did take a step forward, but then I'd always get caught up. Well, I need dental insurance for my kids. You know,
That's a real thing.
It's a real thing. And so I think the thing most importantly is you have to give yourself grace and let go of shame. Shame and guilt, I struggle with both of those for so long, and they're just wasted emotions.
Yeah.
And they're really dangerous because they can take you into a spiral of depression, which I've been through, but they move you further away from what is planned for your life. Get some confirmation with other friends. You know, talk to a few of your close friends and get some confirmation, and that'll help you move forward. And now you also have an accountability team who will keep you taking a step forward.
What does that look like though? Because sometimes if this is like, hey, I'm a tech executive, I'm going to go be a comedian. Sometimes your friends are like, yeah, maybe don't do that.
Yeah, he's lost it.
So some of that's wisdom, but Sam, you got to talk to the people you trust. Like I had a pastor friend who referred to that group as a bundle. He said, who are the people you can call at 2 a.m.? And, you know, you just say half a sentence, hey, I need you. And they're like, we'll be there in 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. You know, who are those people? Talk to them about that. If you do have faith and, you know, or you're at a house of worship and there's a scripture or anything you follow, you want to make sure it's consistent with scripture. If I had a thought that came up and it like didn't align with what I've learned from the Bible, I would not pursue that. I would think, okay, that's probably a dumb idea.
Yeah.
But if I do feel excitement and joy, and I have a couple of people confirm it when I say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and they say, you're amazing at it. You'll always have somebody, particularly it could be your spouse, and you want to take good care of your marriage. My wife, she really went out of her way to try to discourage me with the comedy thing. But unfortunately, I realized at a point that was coming from fear. She was
Totally.
just afraid, rightfully so. She was afraid I'd be leaving a salary job, starting from scratch, and going to freelance. The thing was, at the end of that second year, I told you I took 2 years off to do comedy. The last 3 months before I put that on the shelf, I was making twice as much as I was in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, but it didn't matter. She wanted a salary. You know, all the big companies at that time were laying off 30,000 people.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, there's no safety in working for a big company. But
It's really interesting. Jason and I just had this conversation with our last guest, Jeff Greenberg, about money. And I think that this translates well of like the advice that you're getting or the people that you're trying to like build a good life with and for. It's often not about the thing that you're asking them. Like I would, not to overstep here, but I would assume that it had nothing to do with comedy. And it had everything to do with values and perspective of how a life lived should look. And sometimes that comes with like security and boundaries, and sometimes that comes with a life of adventure and exploration. And if you're not aligned with your bundle, as you say, or your spouse or your family, then that's gonna cause friction.
That's exactly right. In my case, it was being with someone who had a lot of trauma as a kid and who was looking for financial security and control. You know, was chasing this facade that she could control her outcome in her life, which is nobody can.
No.
You know, you can't do that. But that's how she felt. And so, you know, I understand that. Yeah. And that's why I said, all right, look, I'm not going to do this. I'll go to work at IBM and give up the dream. And the comedy came from IBM, of all places.
Which Tim, the fact that like you found a way to implore comedy at a job at IBM, I don't think there could be a more clear sign that that was your calling, because IBM and humor do not go together.
Not at all.
They don't. And Sam, that's exactly the kind of confirmation you're looking for. You know, I mean, not every day is going to work out, but when you get positive confirmation and affirmation, you know, and that you keep getting a lot of that, then yes, 100%.
Yeah, and you just have to open your eyes to it too, because it may not be
100%.
obvious.
Yes, that's the most important.
And I think too, like we talk all about this as well. It's like you followed that call of obligated, right? I think when you start to make that first step, like universe, God, whoever it is, begins to open those doors for you. Like it's up to you to take that first step. It's up to you to have that enough faith to like say, you know what? Yes, I believe enough in this to go do this. And like once that happens, and like the stars begin to align for you.
Yeah, that's right. So the first person I talked to says go to UCB, and that's where I meet Amy Poehler. What are the odds of something like that happening?
Right. Very low.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, not to turn this into a religious podcast, but I did hear this story the other day. You two know more about this than I do, so maybe you can confirm. But it talks about the fear of like moving forward before things are obvious, and how when Moses walked into the sea, it wasn't parted. He walked all the way up to like head level, like he was underwater before it actually parted. And I think that was such a good story for me to hear, because I feel like in today's world, if it's not an obvious next step, if it's not like an easy, clear direction, then it's a hard no for many people. But that's not the reality of how the world works. Like you have to take that step, you have to walk in fear, and then the world, the universe, God, it will all follow, but it's up to you to go there first.
Amen, sister.
Gives a whole new meaning and perspective to I'm underwater.
Yeah, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You might maybe almost have to be before things can open up for you.
Yeah.
Tim, this has been awesome, man. I knew we would enjoy this conversation. I knew it would be outstanding, as all of ours are. I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. Look forward to watching you follow this next stage of your calling as you go to Texas. Where in Texas are you thinking? Do you know?
I'm looking at either College Station, where Texas A&M is, teaching there, or Austin. I went to business school there, and so I have some good friends there. It'd definitely be an easy place to start a career. This is what I'm waiting to hear. I think it's waiting for direction from God, waiting for discernment to know. Then I'll just take a step out of the boat. That's a reference in Matthew 14. Sam, what you just shared reminded me of the story of when Jesus walks on water. Peter is in the sailboat and he says, I want to come to you. And so he's all full of faith, Peter. And he steps out of the boat and he's starting to walk on water. And then he takes his eyes off Jesus and he sinks. I mean, he's completely underwater, literally underwater. Jesus puts out his hand, pulls him up, and gets rescued. That story is always in the back of my mind. It's like, let me just get out of the boat. And it's the point. It's exactly the point you made, with the story about Moses. It's like, sometimes you got to get underwater before you start seeing things happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really strong message that a lot of us need to hear. It's not always going to be super easy. It's going to be terrifying, scary. You're going to feel underwater, like you're going to be ready to quit and give up. But it's in that moment.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Well, we started this show. Tim told me our empire is coming in 2 weeks, so countdown's on.
That's right.
Countdown's on. All right.
Count on
Tim,
it.
thank you so much. I hope that anybody who's listening feels a little more brave, a little more lighthearted, and a little more willing to maybe go try something that's out of their comfort zone. So
Maybe
thank you for
obligated.
your obligated. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope so too. And wish blessings on all those folks.
Tim, if somebody wants to reach out, learn more, where do they find you?
I got an old website, timwasher.com. More happening on Instagram at timwasher.
Okay.
And you can reach me there. Tim@timwasher is my email address. If you want to send me like 2 sentences that says, here's a problem that we solve for customers, I'll send you back a concept that I think will work from a comedy standpoint.
Love it.
Love that.
Just for fun, just for kicks. Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Thank you. We'll see you next time. Be great.
See y'all.